welcome to Unbutton, the podcast. Mojo, Pixie, are you guys ready to see what the topic is?
Yes.
Okay, I've already started the wrestling. WrestleMania. Okay, so our topic seems to be your first experience in a romantic relationship.
Interesting.
That's a really good topic.
So why is it interesting, Mojo? Tell us more.
I liked how specific it was. I was trying to just unpack it a little, saying what is the first experience in a romantic relationship. As the more I think about it, I think because I've had a lot of crushes growing up, I was just trying to think of what does this actually mean? My first experience, which one should I go back to? Because a lot of relationships in the early part of my life have been very one-sided. I've had a relationship that the other person did not know about. In my mind, I've had a relationship with this.
That's only your first.
Yeah. So things like that. Of course, growing up, lots of school life, there's a lot of between friends, you don't know what this is. And especially for me, till I figured out my sexuality, right? Everything was a possibility. Because my friends were going out with girls, I was in my mind, that's also a possibility. So I was and also internally, I knew I was feeling differently, or I was also attracted to men. So it kind of reminds me of this one thing when I thought I was straight. So and probably it was also ignorance for me to think that, if I have a girlfriend, this is going to be I'll figure it out kind of a thing, right? So with one particular girl, and I love her, she's a friend, I really admire her, and I felt, and this was also much later, like in engineering types, right? I liked her, she was really smart and very mature for her age, all of that, and in my mind, I thought this can be
crush.
The person and all of that. So I almost, in my mind, I'd known her for a few years, and then in my mind, I thought I'm going to actually propose to this person.
Oh, wow.
Then, I don't know, I think better sense prevailed, and I did not do it. But yeah, that's beside the point. So, but if I really think about what my first experience in a romantic relationship is, I would like to point out this relationship that I had, I think starting a few years back. It was started as a hookup that became friendship, that I think, in my mind at least, when I think about my first relationship, if I want to call it, albeit it was only a couple of months, where I think I felt romantically interested in the person, and I thought the person was interested in me. So, my experience has been really limited in this area. So I've not had a lot of relationships, but this one I think was, in my mind, a relationship, if I want to call it that, because there was clearly a period where I knew that person was romantically interested and wanted to explore where this was going. And funnily for me, I wasn't in the same mind space. And later, when I was, that person wasn't.
Just a comedy of errors.
So I think, and then we become really good friends. So now it's no longer a romantic relationship, more platonic. So yeah, I don't know.
Just in your way.
Yeah.
I think it is what you think of it. Even in the one-sided one, which I think is so adorable.
Yeah.
I suppose, if you believe you're in it, I guess you are. You're going through the emotions and you're going through the motions of a relationship and doing stuff for the other person and things like that. But yeah, and definitely where both parties are in the know and working towards, or consciously or intentionally deciding to be together and things like that. In that sense, my first, Mojo, much like you, I have not been into many relationships. Is simply not my thing. I'm not sort of geared, I'm not geared towards, constantly being in a relationship, or even having a crush. It's a more recent phenomenon. I'm not even kidding. In the last 3-4 years is when I've started to, have crushes, or immediately sort of meet someone in 5-10 minutes and be like, oh my God, I think this person is amazing. And I have sort of more than just platonic feelings. And then it passes. So that stayed on with me. That it passes and it's not a big part of my life. So as a result, I don't feel the need to act on anything at all. So the fact that I've had a handful of relationships. I would say about, I'm going to call it 2 or 3. But the first one was more, back in the day, kind of, high school days sort of relationship. And I honestly just stumbled into it. And it's really funny because I wasn't seeking it. Because I just didn't think I was fairly mindful. I was fairly self-aware of, what I liked and what I didn't like. And the fact that I wasn't seeking it and things like that. So when I say I stumbled into it, I mean that it started as a friendship. It seems to be a running theme in the other relationships I've had, is that they've started as really, really wonderful friendships that have gone on for some time and then sort of segue without much of an announcement, a preamble, just transforms into plus. Which is basically an acknowledgement that there's something romantic here, and that also includes physical attraction and action and activities.
Cherry, was there a moment that something happened where you found out that it was going from friendship to relationship? Like, did an action happen that made you realize that both of you were going into a relationship?
I'm trying to think back to that time when that transition happened. And I don't know, maybe I guess good relationships, or not good relationships, a good beginning to a relationship is through friendship. And so maybe that's the way my brain functions, is that once I feel love for this person as a friend, it's sort of I'm overflowing with goodwill for this person, and I want the best for them, and I feel for them, and then realizing the intersection with sexuality, which is realizing that I'm attracted to, it's somebody of the opposite gender for me, and somehow being attracted to all of those great qualities in this person. And so maybe the friendship, the fact that it was this wonderful friendship, turns me on. Like, I like, I genuinely respect and like and love this person, and so I start to see them as some, I'm spending so much time with this person that it then becomes, and what I realized in that first relationship is that I'm also fairly physical. I like being physically affectionate. And so how do you show that to a friend who is of the opposite? Because it's not happening with my girlfriends, right? Where you do have a natural sense of, at least my growing up experience has been, we can hold hands, we can spoon, we can hug, and there's a lot of physical affection in between girls and with my girlfriends. So maybe it was a lack of having that with boys, but wanting to do that more. Maybe I don't actually know, because now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that I also have so many guy friends at that same age, at that same time, which was about just showing physical affection and not meaning anything. So that sort of just unravels everything I just said. So, but talking about it making me think about it. I'll think about it and get back to you guys on some more on... I'm sure there was something that must have set it off, right? Something that makes this person go from... Like, it's a lens you're seeing the person through.
For
and
sure.
So, what shifted? Let me think about that, Pixie. Good one. But what about you, Pixie? Where or how did you start a relationship, if you had a relationship, no matter how long or short? Going back to what Mojo shared with us, the length of the relationship should not sort of be the factor that defines it as such.
Yeah, so for me, my first relationship was the same person I went on my first date with. And we started as friends, but I think there was always an attraction. So for me, the friendship and the attraction came together. So after our first date, we started to meet more often. We were in a relationship for 3-4 months maybe. And for me, it was a lot of... because it was my first relationship, I had lots of expectations of what a relationship would be like. So for example, meeting each other often, speaking on the phone often.
So you wanted to do that, or you're saying it was happening?
No, I wanted to. That's what I thought relationships are like,
Gotcha.
But when you're in Bangalore, people are living across Bangalore, and it's really hard to meet very often or connect with each other very often. So I don't even remember how it began, But yeah, we would start texting more often with each other. We became more affectionate in the language that we were using. Definitely more sexual.
Oh yeah.
In the language that we were using, more intimate that way. And because my first relationship also had a lot of things around being sexual with a man, a lot of it blends into each other. So yeah, I have, I feel like, so because the relationship or the experience wasn't very positive for me, I feel like I've kind of forgotten a lot that has happened.
Sure, that can happen.
Yeah, I've just sort of kept it away. What I remember is how it ended more than I remember
how it started
or what happened. So going back to how it started and what happened, I remember being very uncomfortable throughout it because, like I said, I had started my journey very late. I didn't really know how to be in a relationship. I was sort of tippy-toeing around a lot of things that I felt uncomfortable with. And conversations were very hard. I think because this was the first relationship, I really wanted it to work. So I tried really hard to just make this work. Would not really pay attention to what was wrong with it. I think
certain signals that were there and you weren't sort of picking up on it, or refused to do that. Your mind didn't let you do that.
Yeah, and I also felt like I could never be me around this individual.
Ouch.
Which was, in hindsight, a really big flag, right? Like a signal.
Gigantic red flag.
Yeah, how long was this for?
This relationship lasted for 4 months, maybe. I knew that I wasn't feeling me. And I was kind of becoming someone else or being someone else in that person's presence. So yeah, it was actually really difficult. The feeling I'm getting right now as I speak about it is that it was so stressful.
Yeah.
That relationship as a whole.
I'm so sorry you have to revisit that. But really quickly, I think one of the things about not wanting a relationship to end is often tied with how it began. So maybe that was something really pleasant, or this person was something that turns out this person was not later, or whatever. Or you realize that you were behaving differently later. So how did it start? How did y'all meet, Pixie?
So we met, I just moved to Bangalore. We met through mutual friends. I didn't know that many people in Bangalore then. And we just used to hang out a lot as a group. So it started then. So we became friends. This individual helped me a lot as I was sort of adjusting to life in Bangalore. So yeah, I think it started out like that. And then there was attraction from both sides. But I think as we just kept hanging out as friends, the line between whether this was friendship or whether this was something else was really blurred. And for me, I just was like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to ask this person out on a date. That's it. So that's when it started to shift. Because then asking him out on a date, then we started to be physical. There was more intimacy. That's how it started. And then from there, it developed into us hanging out at each other's homes at night, watching films, but never really having a serious conversation about anything. I think my first serious conversation with this individual was when I shared with him about my experience with sexual abuse and, how difficult just being with another person has been, or how I've never done it before so I think that was our first serious conversation in that relationship. And then, yeah, it was just, gosh, my memory is just full of awkward moments. That's all I can imagine. I don't remember nice moments or intimate moments
just sort of fun sort of domestic moments, making chai or coffee for each other, or going to a movie and sharing the popcorn, or simple mundane stuff like that.
Nothing. I just feel like everything was really difficult in that relationship.
And when you have to try that hard, right? I mean, that it shouldn't be that hard, right? You shouldn't have to try that hard. Right, Mojo?
Yeah. In my mind, I'm thinking regardless of how it starts, it could be a friend and you trying to see them differently. It could be a hookup that became something else. I think we all expect a romantic relationship to be a certain way, regardless of how it started, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. And what you said, Pixie, earlier about, whether you were thinking whether you were being yourself. This is something I always think about, right? And as somebody who is still very unsure whether I want a relationship or not, because I'm constantly in my mind, it seems like a lot of work. And so I'm constantly thinking whether I want to be in a relationship or not want to be in a relationship. One thing that's always on my mind is when I am in a relationship, how different I am. I become this other person. usually I think I'm a very like a sorted person, like my head on my shoulders kind of person. But the moment I'm in a relationship, I almost put myself as I become secondary priority. Like I almost give all importance to this person. Then I go all out to please. And maybe it's me, like, the kind of person I am in a relationship. So I think about that a lot in terms of how people change or become something else when they are in a relationship. What do you both think?
So, I mean, I think the easy answer, which is more easily said than done, is that it's a balance. I don't think you're to swing to either extreme of not giving up certain things and not putting someone else before you, or not putting them at all before you. So, I mean, I don't know if it's black or white like that. I think there's a certain optimal level of whatever based on that, the relationship. But in terms of these behaviors, right, I do want to speak to what you said. I mean, when I said that, I thought that was a fair assessment. I mean, in terms of when someone's mindset is like that, and those are the ideas they have of what to expect in a relationship, and they bring those expectations, you can all but get ready to get disappointed because nothing ever meets expectations. But just when you painted that picture, and I know I talked about popcorn and stuff, but the truth of it is that I don't feel any of that. I genuinely, I mean, this first relationship that I was in, I'm not kidding. It was exactly, I would say I was very antithetical to, the opposite to the movies and the things and whatnot. And in those days, with my far more limited vocabulary, I would place it in this binary of like girl behavior, boy behavior. And what we understood to be girl behavior was, wanting more of this and everything that you mentioned, right? Wanting those, having texting all the time, yada, yada, yada. And whereas the boy behavior was being more aloof and being more, not out there and like really shaking yourself in front of this person and wanting to be there in their face all the time. And I have to say, in those days, with my limited vocabulary, I did consider myself the guy in the relationship from a behavioral perspective. I mean, this person wanted to celebrate the 1 month anniversary. And I am not joking. I was aghast.
Yeah.
It turned me, I was aghast and I didn't understand. I didn't comprehend. We were not on the same page. I mean, how much of an investment in this relationship this person was putting. And I think it's very sweet from a just observation perspective if I was somebody else and saying, oh yeah, that's a sweet thing to do. But going all out with these grand gestures for a 1 month anniversary. So I think 1 month anniversary. So for me, I was just like, what is this nonsense? I mean, let's can we just get it together? Which I think, in hindsight, was perhaps a painful reaction for the other person as well. And I perhaps have learned, not perhaps, I have learned that, you need to be more tactful, and maybe that's not your cup of tea, but you need to be mindful of what the other person's language of love is. But at the same time, the idea is that I kind of realize I'm really not into that. And to this day, it's not really the thing that turns me on or gets me going or makes me feel that flow, that love where you just are overflowing with goodwill for this person. Those kind of things, texting, I cannot imagine doing that on a daily basis. And some of those things are the reasons why I kind of don't want to go in a relationship right now. The expectation, it's sort of, in a way, a cousin to what you were just saying, Mojo. That those expectation that the other person is going to want me to talk to them every day on the phone gives me great anxiety.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I think that's valid. I do think that having now been in a pretty long relationship for 2 years, I'm realizing that you actually create your own rules as a couple, and to have that space for communication is really important, because in that first experience, I don't think either one of us had created a space in which we could openly talk about what were some of the things that we were comfortable with, what are some of our boundaries. We didn't create any space for that kind of sharing that would then allow for us to like work in a relationship together. But yeah, no, I definitely agree that there are a lot of expectations we bring into what a relationship is.
Do you think that was a function of maturity, Pixie, when you say we didn't create a space for that? I mean, that's a very high order thing to say. I mean, we didn't create a space for that. I mean, was that a function of maturity and, to even, or just sort of knowledge that, oh shit, we need to do that? Shouldn't we just sit down and say, hey, let's talk about this?
I don't think so. I don't think it's just, I think it comes with just mutual respect for each other. I mean, I remember times during which I felt like what my then partner was saying was very patronizing, in very simple ways. So I just felt like there was never a space, like just in normal behavior, the way you treat each other, that in and of itself is an indication of a space that you are creating. So I never felt like we could even get to a point to talk about having a space, because in general the behavior was such where I didn't feel safe.
So you didn't even feel like broaching the subject, saying, hey, I thought that was kind of condescending, what gives?
Yeah, because there was just as an individual, an interaction between two people itself, I felt like there wasn't a mutual respect. So that the question of even having that conversation was out of the door.
For me, yeah, that's kind of related to maturity. I mean, for me, that's intricately like related to your ability to empathize and your high EQ, emotion quotient and things like that. And so that it's not so much, oh, I know that other people do this and so I need to do that, but more in the evolution of your own self to say, oh, I should consider what the other person sort of, be mindful of what the other person's thinking right now.
Yeah.
I do think also as you keep, when you're in relationships more often, there's a better sense of like, okay, what are, that you have to talk about certain things. You have to be honest about what you're feeling. That in the first one, I found it really hard to just be myself and just say really what I was thinking, because I also felt like it was very new. We'd just gotten into this. So how honest can you really be?
Yeah.
I do think that as you get into relationships more often, you understand the value of communication and you also know yourself better.
Yeah.
As we journey back to the first romantic sort of relationship, that experience, what would be the first thing you remember learning? You already mentioned a few things, Pixie, on, communicate, to create that space. But do you remember the first aha moment you had about yourself? Something you learned about yourself, or you learned about what you don't like?
Yeah, so for me, it was just this special feeling of feeling cared, feeling loved, and having a special person. I think whatever that means, I think just the newness of it and just the feeling that, and I think I've been, fed a lot of bullshit or like just movies that make you think there is this one special person or whatever. Like I'm the 90s kid, so give me that much leeway.
Yeah.
I grew up with a lot of like romantic relationships, and just growing up feeling there is this special person and you find them and all that happens. I think I grew up with a lot of that notion, and for me that aha moment would be just knowing that this is different from anything that has happened before in my life. I could probably like see myself doing all the romantic things that I think are like what I see people like doing in movies and books, and what like ideally they should be doing.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think mine's a little, very aligned to that. Whereas I said that, in that really rudimentary language, I was calling it behavior, girl behavior, in that I realized that I could be vulnerable. I mean, I didn't realize that I would be vulnerable, even after that first month anniversary thing where I sort of almost scoffed at it. Later, being a person who was vulnerable in the relationship, and I remember really missing this person when we were apart by just a few 100 meters. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling a mix of, what is the word? Not shame, but I just I was sort of mocking myself. In that, one part of my brain was like, that's so dumb. Like, what are you doing? Like, how can you miss someone who's literally 200 meters away from you? And the other part was just in it, the emotion of it.
Yeah.
So that was a moment for me. I was like, oh, I can feel this way. I mean, this person's not family, right? Maybe I missed my parents when I went to school or things like that. But missing, having that feeling that what you were talking about, that feeling for this other person was completely new. And I didn't think I was capable of it. I genuinely thought I was devoid of that sort of feeling.
Yeah.
So for me, it was that first moment like, oh, I'm sorry, you're vulnerable.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to sound very corny on this episode especially, but all the romantic songs start making sense to you and you feel, oh, that is what I felt too.
I am with you on that.
No?
I am not with you on that at all. That first relationship, none of that happened.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was, I think I was just too involved with how difficult it was. But yeah, in terms of learning things about myself, I definitely learned what I was seeking in a partnership. I definitely, just the basics, like, the ability to be honest. I really wanted someone who was supportive of my views or my decisions that I was making. So I wanted someone who was supportive and, really in a partnership with me. This one, a lot about this relationship felt unequal. So yeah, I definitely realized what I want in a person, at least a few things that I didn't know before that were important to me.
So it makes me kind of want to ask the question of like, how do you know you're in a relationship with this person? Like, is there that first, like, it can start with a date, and then like, when do you know, hey, we're both in a relationship, we're seeing each other? Like, how do generally people, like, is there a conversation?
I think it depends. In this first relationship, I think it was a relationship for me, but not necessarily for him.
Yeah.
Because we'd never had that conversation about whether we were seeing other people or, we'd never had that conversation. And I didn't know whether he was seeing other people, which I found out much later that he actually was. But that was never, we never talked about that. So, I think for me it was, because for me it was my first experience, and I was involved in it and I wanted to make it work. So for me it was. I don't think it was for him.
Yeah, for me, even subsequent relationships, there was chat and acknowledgement. Well, what is this? I mean, are we doing this? Are we doing this?
Yeah.
So it was, but that's also maybe because I personally also do come from a place of needing clarity and communicating. I think it's a huge value in my life. So maybe that naturally, let's what is this? Let's be clear. Because again, like I said, I was fairly aloof to the general proceedings in the beginning. So I'm okay with, if it's not, then it's not. Aage badho. Like, let's move on with our lives. So I would want that clarity. But I think it can happen sort of organically as well. What I've observed at least is one of the hallmarks of being in a relationship is that your weekend plan is already set.
Yeah.
That you're going to see this person. It's a given. Now, what you'll do and how you'll spend time is a different matter, but that it's a given. Then you know for sure this is a relationship. Whether or not you've had that conversation, whether you've chatted or not, that's a relationship, right? Don't you think like that? I mean,
yeah,
sure.
For sure. And I think I've experienced this as a person outside of the relationship, right? Like, I think as a person who was mostly single all my life and mostly saw a lot of my friends getting in and out of relationships, this was one thing that was, I hated this aspect of it. I was like, you were single all this time, suddenly you're in a relationship and you have no time for me. This sort of like, it's a given that this person is going to spend all their time with this other person. Like, what is that about? Yeah, like I've always had a problem with that. But I do realize, I mean, briefly when I was in the relationship, I think just feeling all consumed by the thought of this person or wanting to be with that person and spend more time, and also just because there is a new person or you're seeing them differently for whatever reasons, you want to get to know each other more. All of that. Yeah,
no, I agree with you, Mojo. I was one of those people too, because I got into relationships much later, and I realized, actually, I was very conscious when I got into a relationship that I'm no longer spending time with my friends. So it became a very conscious effort for me to make sure I'm meeting my friends during the week so that I can spend time with my partner during the weekend. But yeah, it happens. Like, there's something about wanting to spend more time with the individual and being intimate and doing like just really mundane things with someone on like when you have time with that individual, long periods of time. Yeah, so I totally hear you.
Yeah.
But Pixie, that just means that you're super thoughtful. I don't think everyone is as thoughtful or mindful of that. So again, we come back to like that sort of maturity and learning from these relationships. So I guess that's a fun part of it, because honestly, I will say this, that it is not something that I need, but it's something that I do recall. As long as there are good memories, and then there are not so great parts of being in a relationship. But it's not something that I need, but I definitely don't mind wanting. Like, I don't mind being in one. So I look forward to that and seeing a healthy relationship, bloom and blossom, like yours right now, Pixie. It's just kind of nice. So with first to more and better as we keep moving forward. So here's to relationships, guys.
Did you know that when you feel connected to someone, our body releases a hormone called love hormone? called oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
Oxytocin is a chemical that makes us feel safe, secure. It's also the same chemical that a mother releases at childbirth. So kind of has the same impact, especially when you feel connected to a partner. So love hormone, guys.
Oh.
I mean, is that earlier I was sort of talking about goodwill, that it's just overflowing with this sort of sense of just goodwill towards this person. Maybe it's just a hormone.
Yeah. And also,
I don't understand you know that kind of. You know what I mean? That it's all just physiological and not really my feelings.
But it's your feelings that creating these chemicals to
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, it's also your feeling that's creating it. So
yeah,
it's both.
Wow, that's interesting. And did you know in 2015 there was a New York Times article about the 36 questions that lead to love. Basically, it referred to a study by a psychologist called Arthur Aaron, which kind of explores whether intimacy between two strangers can be accelerated by asking a specific set of questions. And these were 36 in number, right? And I think the underlying idea was that mutual vulnerability, what you were referring to earlier, Cherry, can foster closeness. And the questions are anywhere from, would you like to be famous? In what way? Do you have a secret hunch about how you will die? And what if anything is too serious to be joked about? You know, things like that. So you get to know a lot of like intricate, intimate details about this other person. And hopefully, I think the article refers to how you ask all these questions over time, try to understand the other person, and then look into each other's eyes and figure out whether you are in love with this person or not.
I've used it, and I think it's a great list of questions.
Yeah,
I've
I'd
used
agree.
it with partners, but also with friends, so it has many uses.
Yeah,
So 36.
Yeah, that's right. So do look up that New York Times article.
Did you guys know that if you did a Google search about dating, especially in India, looking at the internet here, one of the results that comes up, guys, is people asking the question, is dating legal? I don't know. I'm sort of torn about that. So it's sort of amusing as well as
Sad.
Disheartening and just sad. But just it gives you a sense that everything sort of goes back to that, because we're not talking about things enough that people are worried about whether actions are legal. I mean, let alone anything else. So with that kind of fear in people's hearts, I guess this would be an interesting fun fact, is that if you're in a relationship and you want to live in with them, like it's graduated to that. In India, the apex court has passed a judgment saying that if a man and woman live together, quote unquote, like husband and wife, quote unquote, end quotes, whatever that means. I suppose that means having sex and cohabitating with each other. And you could even have kids, besides the point, that the laws will apply to you, sort of the marriage laws, and they will recognize it as such. I'm sure there are more details to this, but the very idea that rest assured it's not illegal, person looking up whether dating is legal or not. So sweet and cute that is.
So go on and fall in love.
And live with each other.
Read the 36 questions and go for it.
Release some oxytocin, yo.